brilliant entrepreneur, if you've been in business for more than, let's say, a few months, chances are you've experienced a time where you really struggled to sustain your motivation or your energy for your business. The good news is that in today's episode of the Heart-Centered Business Podcast, I'm going to share with you some strategies and tips on how you can sustain that motivation and generate motivation for your business when things might be feeling a little off. This is episode number 494, which means you can find all the relevant links and the show notes for today's episode over at tashcorbin.com/494. And it's also day 9 of Tashmas, so at the end of today's episode, I have a special prezi for you. Let's dive in because I know for some people this year has been a real test of their motivation. And so I want to make sure you've got some ideas and strategies that might help you reignite that fire, reignite that motivation, and sustain it for the coming year ahead. Let's do it. Hello, I'm Tash Corbin, a business strategist and mentor based on the Sunshine Coast in Australia. The mission of this podcast is to help heart-centered entrepreneurs to make more money and in doing so, change the world for the better. This podcast was recorded on the lands of the Gubbi Gubbi and Jinnaburra people. Always was, always will be Aboriginal land. First off, I do want to say that let's be clear. There's any number of reasons why we would validly feel like it's tough for us to generate some motivation for our business on a certain day or in a certain year. There are genuine reasons why we struggle to sustain motivation that used to come to us very easily. So whether you've got some stuff going on behind the scenes outside of your business, whether you're struggling to get results within your business, maybe you've overloaded yourself or you've been overloaded thanks to other people dishing a bunch of stuff on you, that you have created this sense of burnout. There's a lot going on with your health and well-being. Maybe you're in perimenopause. Maybe you've discovered the ADHD and autism side of Instagram reels, and now you're starting to rethink your entire childhood may have been potentially as an undiagnosed neurodivergent person, right? There's any number of reasons why we struggle with motivation. And often there's a lot of external influences that drive our motivation as well. I know for myself, I get very motivated by a lot of positive feedback on my content on socials, right? And I try not to be as flappable, right? I want to be unflappable, whether content is doing well or not doing well. I still want to show up and share content. But the reality is that it does have an impact on us. And a loss of motivation or a struggle to sustain motivation for our work is not a moral failing. And that might come as a shock to you that I would even go there because, of course I'm going to feel demotivated if I'm struggling with a hormonal imbalance. Why would I call that a moral failing? But I do think that for a lot of us, I know for me this is true, our businesses feel like an extension of who we are. They feel deeply aligned with our purpose, what we're here on this planet to do. The work that I do in my business is in the space of helping others. And so that can mean that when we're feeling a lack of motivation in our business, it almost feels selfish. It almost feels like, oh my goodness, I should be feeling motivated and driven to do this because this is what I'm here to do. This is how I help people in the world. This is how I change people's lives for the better. So why on earth am I struggling to get excited about that? And it can lead to people starting to question whether this is what they're meant to do, whether this is their purpose. And then it can lead to this issue of feeling like maybe there's something wrong with you, or maybe you're letting people down. Maybe this is a moral failure, right? I do see that connection happen for quite a few people. So I want to be explicit and say that a lack of motivation for your business is not a moral failure. It is not you not doing the right thing. It's not you failing in any way, shape, or form. It is a reality that we face as business owners, and we all face it. We all do. And if someone says to you that they've never struggled with being motivated in their business, I think they're lying. I honestly do. I don't know anyone who hasn't had that experience of like, oh, what am I doing? Or do I have to do this? Or how could I not have to do anything towards this today, right? We've all had those moments for a range of different reasons. So what I wanted to share with you in this podcast episode are some questions to ask, some things to consider, some strategies that might help to really help you to generate that motivation and also sustain that motivation as a business owner. And I think some of these might surprise you, but they are how I have found really helps for me and also my clients when maybe we are feeling a little bit lacking in the motivation or feeling like, well, I'm really motivated now, but I know come the menstrual phase of my cycle or come the middle of the year next year, I am going to hit a slump. It's going to happen for me. So step one is to lean in to the lack of motivation and ask yourself with curiosity about why. Why am I struggling to feel motivated? Why am I struggling to generate some motivation today or to sustain the motivation that I had yesterday? So we're leaning in and asking why with curiosity. Is it that you are avoiding something or avoiding someone? I know when I'm struggling to be motivated to check my emails, it's because I'm expecting maybe a less than stellar reply to something that feels a bit to me. It might be that I'm avoiding a certain task or I'm avoiding a certain conversation. I'm avoiding something or someone. Now, rather than saying, well, you just have to face up to it, I really lean in with curiosity about why. So you've probably heard this before in coaching terms, like the asking why 5 times before you get to the real answer. And that can be part of it. So I'm avoiding my business and I'm struggling with motivation because I don't want to have to get that email response. Why not? Because it feels like I'm really setting a boundary, and boundaries feel hard, and I don't like the feeling of someone being upset. Ooh, why don't I like that someone might be upset by my boundary? Well, I had boundaries with a friend and it ended up us losing that friendship, and I don't want to lose this relationship with this person. Ooh, that's interesting, right? So it's just going into those layers of why with open curiosity. Sometimes you uncover something that's really out there and feels like it's completely differentiated from your business or it's completely disconnected. But when you ask with curiosity, you can see those connections. And it may not necessarily be that obvious that you're actively avoiding a person or a particular task, something or someone. It might be that you don't want to commit to something. So you feel really motivated about the idea of your business, but the idea of committing to working with another person for 6 whole months and having to show up every week for a session with them for 6 months actually feels quite draining for you to think about. Right? So it might be something along those lines in relation to that commitment. Or, I've had people who talk to me about the Imperfect Post Project, which is the IPP. It's a little event that I run inside the planning system. I've run it before in the Takeoff program. I run it inside the accelerator. And one of the reasons why people resist doing the IPP and creating social content is because they don't want it to mean they have to be on social media all the time. They don't want to commit to having to do a social media post every single day. If I do a daily post for 100 days, I'm going to have to do a daily post forever. And so they're catastrophizing this big commitment out into the future. And so they struggle with the motivation to even give it a try and give it a go. For most people, the reality then of actually doing the IPP reveals to them the joy of social media again and the joy of social media when you don't feel forced to show up every day because your content is showing up for you, right? So the very thing that is causing the demotivation is actually the antidote to the thing that's causing the demotivation. But for some people, we've got to actually have that conversation. We've got to draw it out and ask with a lot of curiosity, why? There might be some mindset wobbles for you that you're feeling like you're not motivated to show up because there's a certain person that you don't want to see you showing up and you don't want to be visible to that person, or just that vague concept of being seen and being visible feels unsafe, right? And that is absolutely valid and legitimate to have pop up for you when it comes to showing up and being seen online, right? That's absolutely valid. There is no bypassing that sense that it's not safe. We need to go there. And that's why my number one piece of advice is lean in with this curiosity and ask why. It could simply be that you don't actually know what to do, or you've got a giant list of things you could do, but none of them really feel like an obvious priority to you. And so it just feels overwhelming. That's very demotivating to have a to-do list of 45 things, but not ever really know which of them is the most impactful, not know if any of them are going to work, not know if you're going to be able to get through that list of 45 things. And so, of course, it's going to create a lack of motivation. But instead of just pretending the lack of motivation exists, instead of just pretending that it's okay and pushing through, if we lean in to the demotivation with curiosity, it can reveal so much insight about how we can reshape our strategy. It can reveal so much insight about some of the mindset work that might need to be done, that we need to be working with a practitioner to really clear this out of the way because it's not serving us anymore. Our visibility blocks really keep us safe as vulnerable humans. They are literally keeping us safe in the world, especially if you are a marginalized person, especially if you are a young person, if you are a woman, if you are from a background that exposes you as marginalized, if you are someone with a disability, right? That visibility block, right? It's not a bad thing. Your visibility blocks are literally safety mechanisms that keep you safe and alive. And so when I say mindset, I don't mean we need to just clear that out of the way and get rid of your need for safety. That would be completely inappropriate of me to suggest that. And I find it inappropriate when mindset practitioners also suggest that, by the way. Instead, we need to look at how it is serving you and how it is not serving you. And often there are very specific applications of visibility blocks that are really powerful and helpful and do keep us safe. And then there are some that kind of become the default, but they don't necessarily serve us when we're showing up in our business. But I would never, ever proffer to say we should all clear all visibility blocks and just feel safe being seen, because that's not true. That is not true, especially not for those of us who are marginalized. So that's where leaning in with curiosity is so powerful. Instead of just trying to pretend it doesn't exist or trying to just override those safety mechanisms that are coming up for us, when we lean in with curiosity, we can make far more precise choices and far more informed choices about what we want to keep and what we want to let go of. Now, the second piece of advice that I have is to, as part of this curiosity, pay attention to your hormone cycles, pay attention to your energy cycles, pay attention to the moon cycles, pay attention to where you're at in your life's journey. For myself, I am deep into perimenopause now, and I know it. I can tell. And because of that, along with other additional challenges I have with hormones, such as endometriosis and cystic ovaries and a fallopian tube that just doesn't want to do its job, I know that my energy naturally fluctuates. I know that there are going to be certain times in my cycle where I'm going to be challenged to have that motivation, to have that sense of drive, to have that go, go, go energy, even for the things that I love and adore. And I actually have had this experience over the last few months as a deeply extroverted person, like on the Myers-Briggs type indicators where you have the introversion extroversion scale. I was extroverted 29 out of 30, right? I'm a deeply extroverted person who loves spending time with people. I love human-to-human connection. I deeply crave time with other humans and especially other women, other marginalized people in my life, because it is such a different conversation. And I've found myself over the last few months not wanting to go and hang out with other humans. That is weird for me, right? It's not about even not feeling so motivated in my business. I'm not even motivated for life. And so how, of course, then would that show up and translate into my business as a business owner? Especially if my business feels like it might be a little harder for me right now. And I shared in an email to my mailing list just recently in early November that I had a realization that quarter 3 was particularly challenging for me. And part of it was a combination of this like perimenopause really hitting me. My dog was diagnosed with cancer in the first week of July. So that was pretty traumatic and challenging. This dog, who is now 10 years old, and we rescued from the streets of Bali and took us 6 years to be able to actually have her in Australia. I'm a little bit attached to that dog, right? So my dog was diagnosed with cancer in the first week of the quarter. Then we spent most of July just managing the treatment process. She had surgery. We cancelled a bunch of stuff and I was very, very much focused on just being with the dog. Then that was compounded by the fact that I didn't do a quarterly plan for quarter 3 this year, because by the time I realized, oh my gosh, I don't even have a plan for the quarter, it felt like the quarter was basically over. And so I then flailed about for a further 2 months with no real concrete plan of what I was doing, but just knowing I had a lot of stuff to do. And that then created a mindset spiral, right? So it layered upon layered upon layered. And then I add into that, I'm going through some particularly big challenges with endometriosis and my hormone cycle and perimenopause. And layer into that, then I'm not feeling particularly extroverted or that I want to hang out with other humans, but hanging out with other humans is my battery charger. And I'm not getting that. Of course, I'm going to feel demotivated, right? So all of this to say, again, that lean in and being curious and being very kind to yourself about it, but also pay attention to what's going on in your body. And particularly when it comes to hormones. I grew up in an era as a 43-year-old now. I grew up in a time, my teen years were in the 90s and then early 2000s. I grew up at a time where if you were feeling low in energy, the prevailing advice was to flog yourself at the gym with exercise, right? So I've grown up at a time where if you were feeling like you were feeling low energy, no one ever said, oh my gosh, it's 3 days before your period. Of course you're going to feel low. Look at the hormone cycle that you're in right now. You're dropping in the hormones that give you motivation and energy, and you're growing in the hormones that make you need to rest and question everything that exists in your life. I didn't have that education. Right? So it's a big relearning, and it has been a big relearning for me over the last few years in particular, probably since 2015 when I discovered Starsha Washburn, the period coach, right? It's been a long time for me to actually understand that my lack of energy in my body is not because I haven't flogged myself at the gym recently enough, right? And I say flogged in the very Aussie term. I apologize for the language that I use, because I know for a lot of people that means something else. But, I haven't been tough on myself at the gym. I haven't gone and forced myself to walk 15 kilometers this week. So therefore, of course, I'm going to be low on energy. Like, oh my goodness. Now, I'm not saying you can't get energy from exercising. Going for a walk with the dogs in the morning is very energizing for me, blah, 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 caveat, yes. But it's very extreme when you grew up in the 90s and the early 2000s. Let's just say that. So you're not a robot. You are a human. And also something that's made a huge difference for me is scheduling different activities in my business, knowing where I'll be at in my cycle. And again, perimenopause has really put spanners in those works because my cycle has become even more irregular thanks to my endometriosis and perimenopause and this dodgy fallopian tube, but I won't go into that any further, right? So something like knowing where you're at in your cycle, at least in a rough sense of the word, and therefore knowing what actions are the best for you to do at that time. So here's a really tangible example for you. I have tried to record this podcast 3 times. And the reason why I've tried to record this podcast 3 times is because I had planned to record all of the Tashmas podcasts in the ovulation phase of my cycle last month, but I didn't quite get them all done. And then, even though I was in the menstrual phase of my cycle, I tried to record this podcast episode and I couldn't find my words. I couldn't think straight. I struggled even just sitting at my desk or on the floor for the period of time that it took to record the podcast episode. And so therefore, I really struggled to record the podcast episode. And I knew that I was going to be into my follicular phase of my cycle just as Tashmas was kicking off. And therefore, if I waited for that, I was going to be recording the podcast episode just a few days before it went out. I don't like to do that to my team. But unfortunately, even though I tried to not do that to my team, I really struggled. So, of course, it would work better if I had done this further in advance. Don't come at me, I know. But knowing that about myself, I could be so much kinder to myself when I did struggle to record it during the menstrual phase of my cycle. And so when you do really connect in with that, and even if you are beyond menstruating or you're not a menstruating person, even if you connect in with the energy of the moon, you connect in with your personal energy profile, right? Knowing what types of activities work best for you at certain times of day, certain times of the month, certain moon phases, that makes a huge difference. And this is particularly relevant if you're listening to this Tashmas episode in December, because think about how motivated you are in January. Think about how motivated you are at the Lunar New Year. There are so many people that I know that if they don't batch record their content in the first month of the year, they really struggle with getting it done at any other time. But in the first month of the year, for them, some people define that as January, some define that as February, some people go on the financial year, whatever it is for you. But there's a certain time of year or there's a certain time in the quarter where if they do it all at that point in time, they know they're going to be excited and motivated for it. And so if it doesn't happen, they know it's going to be a little more of a challenge, but then you can just take it easier on yourself because you know, oh, look, normally if I do my batching of my content in January, I get so much of it done and I don't have any problems with it. I didn't happen to get all of it done this time around, but I can go gentle on myself and look for those opportunities where my motivation comes back for it and really ride that wave when that motivation comes back rather than trying to force it. So this definitely applies for me as well when it comes to setting up my strategy for the year and my launch plans for the year and also prepping launches well in advance. I am on a huge high of excitement and motivation and energy when I'm mapping out a launch well in advance, and I feel like I could do all of the launch setup in 2 days. Then after a couple of days, it starts to fade off. It starts to feel like it's dragging out. If I don't get it done quickly, it feels like it's taking up too much time and space. So what would that then do for how I change up the way that I plan and prepare my launches? The best thing I can do to ensure that I plan and prepare my launches quickly and sustain that motivation and get it done and like it doesn't feel like it's dragging out is to ensure that I block out a couple of days. I block out a couple of days where I'm not having 1,000 other things that I need to do. I'm not necessarily having client call after client call. I'll still have client calls, but I have spaciousness around them. Now, for me, the reason why I still have client calls is if I wake up in the morning and I see in my calendar for the day, I have no client-facing time, I have nowhere I need to be, I have no appointments, that's a day off. Right? And so no matter how much I tell myself, wow, I've got a whole day to get this done. This is amazing. If I have no human-to-human connection that day, if I have no reason to sit at my desk that day, getting me to my desk to do my launch planning and preparation is going to be a struggle. So either I'll have a takeoff call at the start of the day because talking to toffees is just so much fun and I love helping them and I feel like it's really powerful and practical advice that I'm giving and it really gets me in the mood, right? So if I don't have that, it might be that I meet with a team member. I co-work with a business friend. So I make sure I've got some appointments in the calendar, but there's spaciousness in the calendar as well. And if that spaciousness is there, it gets done. If that spaciousness is not there and I have to jam it into an hour here and 20 minutes there and an hour there, for me, that feels torturous because it feels like this launch preparation is taking weeks and I don't like it. I like a short, sharp project. So see how just being curious about the cycles, but also what works for me, what time of year I'm motivated, what time frame I can stay motivated for, by knowing myself more deeply, I'm far more effective and I'm far less likely to waver in my motivation as well. Okay. The next piece is being realistic. Overload catches up with you eventually. And I think for a lot of people who are frustrated with themselves because they can't stay motivated or they're struggling to get motivated, the number one driver of that is they are unrealistic with their expectations of themselves. They are unrealistic with what they think that they are going to be able to achieve, but they are also unrealistic about the results that will come from the actions that they're taking. So I saw this actually just a couple of months ago. I was working with someone and we were working on developing a webinar for a launch that she was doing. And she was so excited about this webinar. She was so sure that this was going to be exactly the thing that was going to like completely change the trajectory of her business. And in part of the workup of that webinar, I was talking with her about previous webinars she'd run and what were the types of results and how was it working. And the most people she'd ever had register for a webinar before was under 20 people. And so I said, as part of this process, well, let's aim for 50. But even if you don't get 50 people signed up for this webinar, this is going to, if it's more than you've had before and we can get some live attendance, we can get a conversion, it's a sign you're on the right track and we can snowball that into bigger results. And she was deflated by that. She was like, no, this is going to be it. Like, I need this to have 250 people register for it. And I was like, that's great. Like, I love that you've got a stretch goal and we definitely need to then look at some different strategies like ad strategies or joint ventures or getting someone else to help you because you don't have the audience size to realistically expect that from organic strategies alone. So yes, we can put the strategy together to increase the odds that you do get 250 people signed up to this webinar. It might take a little more time. It might take a little bit more effort in terms of tapping into your business network. It might take a little bit of money to get it in front of the right people. And that money on ads then takes a bit more time because you've got to get the ads working well, right? So yes, we can definitely come up with some strategies that will be more likely to get 250 people registered. But there's a huge red flag here. And that is you are pinning your excitement about your business and your sense of motivation for your business on something you have no control over. You can influence the number of people who sign up to this webinar, But if you are pinning all of your hopes and dreams on 250 people signing up for this webinar, and you don't actually have control over how many people sign up for this webinar, I can see an energy slump. I can see a motivation slump ahead of you. So let's be mindful of that and not set you up for that, right? So we need to be realistic in our expectations of ourselves, but also in our expectations of the results from what we're doing, especially if it's the first time you've done it. It's not a validated strategy. You have a small audience. This needs to be part of a longer term strategy. If you're constantly feeling disappointed by your results, of course, it is going to be challenging to sustain your motivation. I don't tie how I feel about my business to the results my business is generating. I am motivated from internal factors, not external results. And that is absolutely critical for me. So aim for average. Just be average. You can't be an overachiever if the expectation that you set for yourself is an unrealistic expectation in the first place. So many people who start businesses do have an identity of being an overachiever. And they have an identity of being an overachiever because they outperform the average of people that they hang out with in certain spaces, right? So if you think about being in school, you're an overachiever if you do better than most other students. If you think about being in the workplace, you're an overachiever if you do better than most of your peers in the workplace. But as a business owner, what are you overachieving on? Most people don't make this connection at a logical level. Number one, they want to be an overachiever in business, so they're comparing their business growth and results to everyone else's perfect, shiny examples that they're sharing on the internet of what their results are. But guess what? Your average achievers in business aren't sharing their results online. Your underachievers in business are not sharing their results online. So you're comparing yourself with the top 5% of achievers in business. You're not comparing yourself with all business owners, right? So your overachiever is starting to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm an underachiever because look at all these people and their results. I'm doing nothing like that. Oh my gosh, I'm so far behind. But you're not. You are still an overachiever, but you're just not seeing who you're overachieving on, right? So that's number one. But number two, because you're no longer in a large-scale workplace or a large-scale educational facility, the only person you have to achieve against is yourself. So now your definition of being an overachiever is I exceed and overachieve compared to my expectations of myself. But your expectations of yourself are sky high, and they are impossible to overachieve on. So see how you've created a little spiral for yourself because there's no way to overachieve? Instead, if you set average expectations, you aim to show up in an average way, you expect average growth, you expect an average number of tasks to be completed each day, now you've got something you can overachieve on. You've set yourself up with an opportunity to overachieve. But for most people, that's also an unsustainable thing. Instead, that's why inside the planning system, for example, we have 4 things a day. 4, that's it. If you do your 4, you get an A+. That is overachieving. Because if you string together 4 days a week, most weeks, where you achieve your 4 top priority tasks each day, guess what? You will be an overachiever in results. For most people who are frustrated because they identify as an overachiever and they don't feel like an overachiever in business, the reason is because they set themselves a task list that is insurmountable every single day. And so they end every day feeling like an underachiever. I end every day feeling successful and like an overachiever. How? I set a really low bar for myself. And that might sound like the easy way out. It's not. It's not the easy way out. To only have 4 things on my to-do list each day requires me to be very dang strategic about what's actually going to move the needle. It requires me to be very focused on high return actions income generating actions, and therefore all of those fluffy little tasks that would make it onto my to-do list, if I allowed myself a 20-point to-do list, are not there. They're not there. So the 4 things I'm doing are very strategic. But guess what? I get them done most days. And that makes me feel successful. So for a lot of people, there's a redefinition of what achievement looks like and where you're aiming for and what is a realistic standard to set for yourself and standard to set for your results. Perfectionism in particular starts to generate this all or nothing thinking. And I see it for quite a few people as well, where they have such a high expectation of themselves that if in any way, shape or form the day looks like it's not going to go how they want, they write the whole day off. So they had a goal to record 15 podcast episodes in a day, and the first podcast takes an hour and a half because they've had some troubles, they've stumbled over their words, they had a tech issue. And so what do? They stop recording altogether. Days are right off. I've done one, but it's taken me an hour and a half. There is no way I'm going to be able to get 15 done today, so why bother? Or here's my list of 28 things that I'm going to achieve today. It's now midday. I haven't done any of them because I got distracted by the social media feed. The day's a write-off. I'm done. The very need to overperform results in underperformance because it creates that all or nothing thinking. Okay, next up, when it comes to generating and sustaining motivation, is to know what works for you. I know how to get energized and motivated when I want to. And I do sometimes need a reminder of what works for me. But also, some days I'm just not feeling it. So a fun small starter is often a good test. If I start my day with a little bit of tapping or EFT and journaling, that can sometimes help to reveal for me how am I really feeling today and why. And I can pay attention to what is coming up for me, what is going on for me, and whether that lack of motivation is something to just allow to exist or whether it is something that I can counter with some simple start of day routines or some simple pump up exercises. So for example, talking to my team, really good for me to get motivated. Talking to a biz bestie, very good for me to get motivated. Listening to other people's podcasts really helps me to be motivated. I love listening to podcasts in the morning because it gets me so excited for my day. And I need to be mindful and careful not to let it derail me or distract me or cause shiny object syndrome, right? I'm clear on what my priorities are for the day, but I also have made it my business to really know how to motivate myself and to really know what motivates me. A huge insight for me earlier this year was in recognizing the different drivers of motivation for my partner, David, and I. So he is someone who is really motivated by an end of day reward or working towards a goal. And that is some way off into the future as well. So he's very motivated when he sets himself a goal, and if he achieves that goal, he gets a little treat, right? Or he gets a reward. So for him, he loves gaming. So for him to sort of dangle gaming as a carrot at the end of the day, if he gets his top 3 tasks done, really works for him. That's enough to motivate him to get his tasks done for the day. That doesn't work for me. And it's taken me a long time to realize just how little of an impact it has on my motivation. And part of the insight into that for me came with deepening my understanding of my sacred money archetype. And I have learned sacred money archetypes through Denise Duffield-Thomas. It's not her original work, but she applies it specifically to business, which I find really helpful. So I'll put a link to her quiz in the show notes of today's episode. It's at denisedt.com/quiz. And so, by knowing my sacred money archetypes, it really has helped me to deepen my understanding of myself and also where my energy and motivation comes from. So my top archetype is a romantic. And the romantic is driven by pleasure, driven by ease, driven by that sense of I deserve this, right? I inherently am a worthy and deserving person. And so telling myself that I only deserve a treat or I only deserve a reward if I do something is completely counter to who I am and what motivates me. I am a pleasure first kind of person. So if I made a little rule for myself, for example, that once I've written this email sequence, then I'll be able to go for a lovely swim, then my brain becomes fixated on the swim. I just want to go for a swim. Why can't I go for a swim now? Don't I deserve a swim now? What's wrong with me? Why do I have to bribe myself to be allowed a swim? I demand I have a swim, right? So rather than it incentivizing me to do the action, now it's got me fixated on the pleasure. So I'm literally pleasure first. If I want to go for a swim, I go for a swim. I know that if I actually allow myself to experience that dose of pleasure as I feel it, as I want it, when I want it, then I feel intrinsically motivated to do my work, right? And this can be really hard for people who have this kind of archetype to actually believe what is possible for them because we have so much driven ourselves almost to the point of deprivation that we have a belief that if we allow ourselves the little pleasure, that dose of pleasure immediately, well, we'll never be motivated to do work, right? So here's a really tangible example of this. I love stickers, right? And part of using my planner involves me having a lot of cool stationery and a lot of really cool stickers. But I don't reward myself with stickers for a job well done. Instead, I set my day up with stickers. I start my day with doing some crafting, doing some beautiful setup of my day in my planner, using color, using my stickers, and I've mapped out this day, but in a really gorgeous, pleasurable way. I can't help but want to get started on doing my tasks. So for someone else, the stickers are the reward, but for me, the stickers are the pleasure first approach. Now, I do also reward myself with stickers because I have little tick stickers that I put when I do have something completed, but I don't deprive myself of the sticker use until I've done something. And so I used to say when I was struggling with how to treat myself nicely and being kind to myself when I first started my business, I used to say I'm far more motivated by sticks than carrots, right? So, you can say you can motivate with a stick or you can motivate with a carrot, right? Either I'm going to smack you or I dangle a carrot in front of your face. I think it's something to do with horses. I don't know. Anyway, I used to say that all the time. I am far more motivated to get something done where I'll be punished if I don't do it than I'll be rewarded if I do. And that was probably not 100% accurate. It was a belief I was carrying around about myself. But now looking back at it, it is actually true, but it was a different solution that I needed to focus on, right? So rather than just accepting, I'm not really motivated by rewards, I'm not motivated by carrots, right? Rather than just accepting I'm not motivated by carrots, so therefore the only alternative is I must be motivated by punishment. Instead, I recognize now that I'm not motivated by rewards dangling away in the future. I'm literally just motivated by living a life of pleasure. I'm literally motivated by giving myself a dose of pleasure whenever I need it. So I used to back then say, gosh, if I allowed myself to just do whatever I wanted, if I just leaned into being nice to myself, I'd just sit on the couch and eat nachos and watch Netflix for the rest of my life. I would never do any work. And that is not at all true, right? That is not at all true. And when I really think about it, I don't even believe that to be true. But that was what I was carrying around in my brain. That was the belief about myself that I held. I grew up being called lazy my entire life. And that's often the experience of romantics, by the way. I grew up being told that I was harder to motivate than the most stubborn of donkeys, right? I was like a stubborn mule. I was really hard to motivate. And from an external perspective, it may have looked like oppositional defiance. It may have looked like I was a bit of a rebel, but it wasn't that. It was that I needed to find intrinsic motivation, and my fast track pathway to that is pleasure. And for a lot of people that I have this conversation with, they also have that fear. If I just allow myself to do what I want, to have that reward without doing the work to earn it, I'll just consistently reward myself. I will never feel motivated to get anything done because I'm not dangling any carrots out there. But part of the process of leaning into this sometimes does involve taking a whole week off to just explore what you want to do and just have fun with it, because we're so pleasure deprived. We've never earned it. We've spent so long depriving ourselves of the things that bring us pleasure, of the things that bring us joy, that we do go a little gung-ho at first, right? We do get a little overzealous at first with those pleasure-driven activities, because we've so deprived of those pleasure-driven activities for so long. And so sometimes people do say that to me. They'll say, look, I gave myself the pleasure first mentality on Monday and I didn't end up doing anything in my business. And then I was like, nah, I'm going with this experiment. All right, pleasure-driven Tuesday. And again, I didn't feel the urge to do anything work-wise, and I didn't feel drawn into my business. And 2 days for them is evidence enough, all or nothing thinking. Nah, it just doesn't work for me. But often it's because they have been so out of touch with what it is that they want that they've never kind of got to the other side, right? And it's like when you first start a new skincare routine, and it might bring out some blemishes, or it might irritate your skin at first because it's been so deprived and so neglected. But actually, it's like that's part of the process, is actually getting to the point where you're nourishing your skin and it's allowed to kind of release all of the stuff that's not helpful in there, that it's holding on to because your pores have been so slam shut tight because they've never had a dose of moisture in their lives, right? So sometimes it does get a little worse before it gets better. And it's important that you actually ride out that wave. Now, I don't want to turn this whole podcast into how to live like a romantic. Come on retreat with me if that's what you want, because, oh my gosh, do we live pleasure first on retreat? But I want this to be a driver for you to actually know what works for you, and to recognize that what works for you might be so far from what societally we have been told should work for you that it might feel really counterintuitive. It might feel really out there that what works for you is something that just, there's no way it could be something that works. But I can tell you from experience, the pleasure first approach absolutely works for me. And not only that, when I consistently find ways to embrace pleasure in my life, I am so excited to work in my business. I am so stimulated. I am so keen to show up and create content. I become so prolific. And it's so funny to me because often in my audience, people will be like, wow, you're working so hard at the moment. And that's actually not my experience. I'm not working hard. It's actually that I'm embracing pleasure so consistently that everything I do just feels like it's on an extra level, like it's just working so much more effectively. Things flow so much more quickly. I'm so motivated and I'm so excited. And I'm not necessarily working longer hours. I'm not working harder. I'm just far more driven in the time that I am working, or what I do works so much more effectively because I'm showing up as this joyful, amazingly magnetic person because I'm experiencing so much pleasure in my life. And I'm experiencing this life of intrinsically feeling worthy and deserving because I treat myself like a person who is worthy and deserving. And that takes practice. So go about this journey of getting to know who you are. And as I said, I'll put a link to the Sacred Money Archetypes. That definitely helped me. But I have 1,000 different things that I know about myself. I am someone who is deeply curious about who I am and what works for me, and my astrology, my human design, my Myers-Briggs type, my personality profile. I would do a quiz that asked me what kind of cheese I am, right? Because it will tell me something about myself. And I think being fascinated by yourself takes practice, but it is really powerful. So find what works for you, know what works for you, explore and play with what works for you. And if there are opportunities to know yourself a little more deeply, take those opportunities. I think they always come back in so much return on investment. And then the final piece of advice that I have for you when it comes to generating and sustaining motivation in business is borrow it. Absolutely borrow it. So if you are feeling a bit demotivated because you're starting to think maybe no one wants help with this, go and talk to someone. Go and talk to someone about it, right? That's one of the things that a lot of people do reflect back to me in one-on-one client sessions, is that they are so excited that I'm excited about their business existing. And it's genuine excitement, right? I can't fake that sort of stuff. When I hear about a business or a service or someone who's bringing together two really disparate skill sets and making an offering that I can see how needed it is, I cannot help but express that. And so I can see that a lot of people are borrowing my excitement about the business that they're building. And I think that's a beautiful thing to do. We are an inherently social creature. We are a species that thrives on connection and, cohabiting and living together and being in each other's orbits. And so whether you borrow that motivation by working with a mentor who really does believe in what it is that you do, whether it's going to events, being part of a mastermind, doing co-working, right? Like for me, co-working and running co-working sessions has me doing lots of work because I'm in the energy of other people doing stuff. And so I want to be productive with that time as well. And so I'll often do the tasks that I've been avoiding during a co-working session because the pleasure of being in the company of other people actually is enough to go stimulate that. Oh, okay, I'm going to do this. I feel like I can do this today. It might be having business buddies. It might be going to more events. I know that for me, part of the reason why I started the Heart Centre Business Conference was I really struggled to find a conference like that. I really struggled to find consistent conferences and events that I could go to, especially in Australia. And I know that there are quite a lot more conferences and events that are available to us now, and that's brilliant. Go to them. I'm a big ticket buyer, right? I go to a lot of conferences and events myself that are run by other people because I love it and because I know how much it allows me to borrow that energy, that motivation, that sense of focus as well. Going to mastermind retreats and going to mastermind calls and hearing someone else reflect a very similar experience to mine and being in the space of wanting to help that person with their lack of motivation, it helps me with mine. Right? It's having a conversation with someone else and asking them, have you tried this? Is this going to help drive that for you? Is this going to help motivate you? What is it that's going to help motivate you? And having a conversation with them about their lack of motivation magically fixes mine because I'm basically giving that advice to myself at the exact same time as well. And so I think that tapping into connection with other humans, and particularly actual conversations, not just writing messages or being in Facebook groups with others, but actually having conversations and helping other people is a huge way to generate and sustain motivation. And I get that even in being in client-facing sessions. That was a big reason why when I first started my business, I worked with people regardless of how much they paid me. I experimented with very low cost single sessions because I would rather help 5 people who paid me $20 than help one person who paid me $100. At that point in time in my business, there was a lot I needed to learn. There was a lot I needed to practice. There was a lot of loneliness. I went from working in an office of 20 people to working on my own. And so for me, that was a huge part of the decision process to actually do that, because every single person that I helped motivated me. Every single person that asked me a question gave me something to respond to that I could then go and share with a broader audience. So my content felt like it was actually in response to what people were asking, rather than me just throwing advice at the internet without actually having anyone want it. And so for me, that borrowed motivation doesn't just come from being in spaces where it's obvious the other person's going to motivate me, like working with a mentor, right? It's very obvious that working with a mentor is going to really motivate me, especially if I have invested big money to work with that mentor. I'm really going to be motivated to do what they advise. I'm really going to be motivated to implement. But even being in the mentoring position is deeply motivating for me and is an opportunity for me to borrow that motivation, because, I've got off calls the last couple of weeks and just walked out of my office and said to David, I feel like a freaking genius today, right? Because I am in my zone of genius when I'm working with people, when I'm giving business advice, when I'm looking at people's data and numbers, and we've come up with this magical messaging ecosystem and all of a sudden everything makes sense. I feel like a genius when I'm working with clients. And I know that there are a lot of people in the early stages of business who are depriving themselves of that experience because some random business coach somewhere told them that if you ever charge less than $300 an hour, you are no longer a specialist or an expert. And so they're sitting there on their own in their office. Now I'm getting ranty, right? Without ever having a client to talk to for 3 weeks on end, because of some random piece of advice that they have to charge a certain amount or it's not worth their time. And they're devaluing themselves and they're devaluing the work that they do. And all I want for that person is to experience the joy and the motivation and the momentum that comes with actually serving another human as a business owner and having a client to work with. And so if that's something that you feel is holding you back and that's something that's been your experience, why not experiment with it? Why not just chuck a few things out there that are very connected, one-to-one or very small group offerings, and they're deeply accessible price-wise, knowing that the return on investment for you isn't just money, it's also a lot of energy, a lot of insight into your messaging, and a lot of motivation. Okay, so I know this has been a slightly longer episode, particularly for a Tashmas one, but I do get very, very ranty about motivation. And I just want to recap what those core strategies were. So the first is lean in and ask why with deep curiosity. The second is to pay attention to when works best for you for certain activities, whether that be based on your hormone cycles, the moon, natural times of year, natural times of day where you feel more motivated, really paying attention to when is a good time for you. I also didn't say there, but probably should have, focus on where as well in terms of environment. I am far more likely to feel motivated to record podcast episodes when I'm in a creative space, when I'm out of the normal routine of sitting at my desk in my office. I do record some podcasts at my desk, but it's not a normal work day, or I haven't just been sitting at my desk for 2 hours and now I have to sit here for another 2 hours recording podcasts. I like to change things up. I like to map out my podcast structure bar, sitting in a cafe with a lovely decaf almond milk coffee, right? So those kinds of things really do make a difference, not just when and what time of day, but also location and work environment. There are certain things that I can do around noise and with the dogs around me and with hustle and bustle. And there are other things where I need peace and quiet and I need to be on my own. And so really knowing what those are for you. Number 3 is being more realistic in your expectations of yourself, but also of your audience and your results and your growth. So being far more realistic with your expectations means that you are far less likely to end your day feeling like a failure or feeling like you're behind or feeling like this isn't working because you expect such huge results the first time you ever try something and it's not validated. So being really mindful about the expectations that you're setting for yourself and your results and being very realistic about those. Number 4 is really getting to know yourself more deeply and what works for you, particularly when it comes to that intrinsic and internal motivation. And then number 5 is to borrow motivation, whether that be from mentors, peers, being in a particular working environment, from clients, from what you're seeing online. Really know what helps to motivate you in terms of connecting with others and experimenting with different ways to connect with others to tap into that borrowed sense of motivation. Which brings me to your special gift today as day 9 of Tashmas. And that is that if you would like to give your motivation and momentum a huge kickstart in 2026, I am running a week-long event called Kickstart 2026. It goes from the 12th to the 16th of January, and it involves a workshop and co-working session every single day for 5 days. We kickstart different components of your business and the momentum that you're generating in those pieces of your business. We kickstart your CEO energy, your content, your conversions, your consistency. They all start with C. And it's a really powerful way to access actually quite a lot of these all at once, because you'll be experimenting with different strategies and different ways to set yourself up. You will be paying attention to the expectations that you're setting for yourself and setting very realistic expectations for that first week and what it is that you're going to be doing, but you will absolutely blow those expectations out of the water. Hello, overachiever. You'll get to know what works for you far more, and there'll be more depth around understanding what works for you, and you'll be borrowing motivation by being in the room with other people who are kickstarting their year. You'll be in the room with me. I love to help motivate and share that motivation with you. And so Kickstart is such a powerful experience and such a powerful event to get your year started with some epic momentum. Now, I do want to say that if you are not planning to start your year on the 12th of January, you're someone who you wait until your kids are back at school if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, or, you wait until February before you start your year, Kickstart might not be the right fit for you. And that is absolutely fine. I don't want you to feel pressured to dive into something on the 12th of January when that's not a time where you particularly want to get a kickstart. So please don't think that you have to do this, or that I'm in any way implying that if you don't start on the 12th of January, you're going to be left behind, because I'm not implying that in any way, shape or form. I know that a lot of people have a slower start to the year. But if you are someone who wants to have that big kickstart and a huge upswing of momentum nice and early, then I'd love for you to come and check out the Kickstart program. And for the first 26 people, because it's 2026, who come and comment on the day 9 post with following the instructions over on my Facebook page, you'll get $26 off. So the Kickstart event is actually a very affordable price considering what you get for it. Is in essence a week-long mastermind that has a lot of strategic direction, opportunity for co-working, mentoring and coaching from me. It has its own dedicated Facebook community. There's opportunities to platform your business. You get your business in the spotlight. You're borrowing my audience, not just my motivation. So it is a really, really cost-effective way to tap into a lot of those different things. And for the first 26 people to come and grab their discount over on the Day 9 post, you will get $26 off. So make sure you come and check all of that out. The show notes will have the instructions and the links for you. They will be at tashcorbin.com/494. Thank you so much for joining me for this slightly longer Tashmas episode of the Heart Centered Business Podcast. I hope it's helped. I look forward to hearing your feedback on this one. And until next time, I cannot wait to see you shine. I'll see you tomorrow for day 10. Bye for now.